So welcome everybody to the Mylio Coffee Break. My name is Angela Andrew, and I'm a product evangelist for Mylio, which means that I'm here to help you be successful with the software. Today, we're going to be talking about enhancing and repairing historical photos, which editing is one of my favorite things to do. You go ahead and share my screen, and we're going to jump right in because I have some slides for you in addition to actually going into Mylio and some of my other favorite editing tools to show you how I edit these photos and the things that I do to make them look their best. So for those of you who were able to attend Roots Tech either online or in person, you might have come across this class. This was one of my pre-recorded classes that I did for Roots Tech. And I've just kind of shortened and condensed it down for this coffee break, but we're going to cover a lot of the same stuff. So hopefully you guys enjoy this. Today we're going to be covering a handful of things from why we want to preserve historical photos, the types of different photo damage you're likely to come across, some of the basic repair techniques that you don't even have to leave Mylio photos to correct. And then we're going to go into some more advanced techniques in repairing damage and some enhancements that you can do with AI. And then have a little final discussion on how to keep it real and preserve the actual quality and historical value of the documents and photos that you're restoring, because it's very easy to take it too far. There's some great tools out there, but you don't want to lose that character that the original photo has. So why do we want to preserve historical photos? Well, for many of us, it's our family legacy. Not only is it the pictures we're taking today, we're preserving things from previous generations, and we want to create an archive that we can hand down. There's also the aspect of genealogical research and finding out those details that make us who we are and the stories and successes and trials that our ancestors went through. And photos can really help us understand those things. And that leads us to the emotional connection. When we're looking at pictures of our parents, our grandparents, and even people farther back, it really gives us a sense of belonging that these are the people who came before us and we have purpose in this place. So just a few little comments here on the pictures on the screen. Most of the pictures you see in this are going to be my images from my library. So on the left, that's me and my dad. When I was a kid, my dad did motocross racing and we spent many a weekend at the track. So this was out there, before one of his races and hanging out with him on the bike, the starting line before he was, as he was getting ready to go. On the right, we have my maternal grandmother. And I love this picture of her looking in the mirror. The composition of this image is just stunning. And then you see on the mantle, the picture of my grandfather. And I think this was even before they were married. That's my grandfather. And the picture is put in such a way that it looks like he's looking at her. So I think that's just a really neat photo. Below that, we have my paternal grandfather, and he raced jalopies. So lots of really cool historical stories in my family. And I love knowing that, my grandparents and even the people who came before them, they had adventures, they did things, and that's that emotional connection. So as you're going through some of these pictures, the typical damage you're going to come across is going to be fading, discoloration, and then unfortunately, if it wasn't stored properly, you're going to have physical damage. So those are the things that we're going to cover today. Some of the basic repair techniques that we're going to go over are how to fix those faded photos, how to make those colors pop and restore color, and inverting some scan film. So let's jump into the first image. This is a picture of my aunt. You can see the option on the left is faded. It's still a good quality image. On the right, it just looks a bit better. It pops. So let me show you how I did that. I'm going to jump over here to Mylio and grab this photo. Now I'm going to go ahead and reset this. And this is one of the beautiful things of editing from within Mylio Photos is that my original scan is completely unaltered when I do edits here. And I can revert back to that original at any time. So what I want to start with here is let's go ahead and do a quick crop and get rid of the border. And this is completely optional. Not everybody's going to want to do that, but I'm going to go ahead and do that here and just pull in these edges and make this so we're just looking at the photo. There we go. And from there, you can either click done down here in the bottom or just hit return on your keyboard. And now we have that image larger. We can take a better look at it and do some more modifications. Now, this image, it's not terribly discolored. It's really just that it's faded. So the one tool, and this is a very new feature in Mylio, is the auto tone. I'm going to go ahead and click that, and you'll see that that immediately makes this image better. It's a little bit dark for my taste, so I might also choose the auto enhance, and that brightens it up. If you need to do anything else, you can bring those blacks up a little bit more, maybe add a little bit of clarity for that mid-tone contrast and appearance of detail. And I would say this image is done. And just in a few clicks, we went from here to here. And that's a really, really easy way to fix a faded photo. So next, let's take a look at improving colors. This is Grizzly. On the left is the original. On the right is my edited version. And you can see with the image on the left, we've got that magenta color cast that is very typical of 1970s and sometimes 80s scanned pictures. The film processing in those days, they were using chemicals that over time have really tended to turn things that magenta hue. So it's really nice to be able to go into Mylio and very easily fix these. So let me show you how it's done. Again, I'm going to be here in Mylio. Let me go ahead and go back. And here's the picture of Grizzly. I'm going to go ahead and reset that edit. And here's our original. Now, again, you could go ahead and crop off that border if you want to. In this case, because I know we don't have a ton of time today, I'm going to go ahead and leave the border alone. And for this image, I'm going to choose auto color. So that's going to go ahead and do 90% of the color correction that this image needs. You'll see that it looks a lot more natural than it did just a second ago. Now I can go down to levels, which auto here in levels is the same as auto color, and make some fine-tuning adjustments just to make these colors look a bit better. I'm going to go ahead and start with our reds, and I can grab this middle slider here, and you can see it's bringing in more red, or I can pull out that red a little bit more. Now, as I move this over to the right, the greens are getting a little strong, and now it kind of has a bluish hue to it. So I can jump over to that blue channel and warm this up. And when I say warm it up, I'm saying bring to take out some of the blue and bring in some more of those golden hues. Because we can see that's some dead grass. It's going to be kind of that golden color. We can go ahead and pull that up, and that looks much more natural. If you need to, you can always go back up here and maybe pull up the blacks a little bit more, add a little bit more of the clarity, and that's looking awesome. So again, here is our before and our after. And these tools are all in Mylio and only take a few seconds per image to do. Now, if you have a lot of images that are very similar and you want to copy these adjustments from one to the other, it's really, really simple. You can just go over here, click back to your grid view and choose copy, and then select another image or group of images, and then click paste. And that's going to apply those edits to all of those different photos that you select. Next is going to be inverting scanned film. So if you have a film scanner or a flatbed scanner with a film attachment, it's better to go ahead and scan in your film than it is to scan in your prints. You're going to get a higher quality image than if you scan in the printed image. So if you have that available to you, what's going to happen is you're going to scan that in, and you're going to get something like what's on the left. But what you want is what's on the right, the picture that you actually remember. So it's going to look like the one here on the left, or maybe even more of an amber color. So let's go ahead and fix that here really quick. I'm going to jump back over to Mylio, and we're going to grab that same image. Let me go ahead and reset. There we go. And now we have what it looks like when you scan in film. So I'm going to go ahead and scroll down, and under the color section here, we have invert. And bam, that inverts it. So you can see it still has a bit of a color cast. That's where our auto color is going to come in really handy. And then if you need to, you can go ahead and make any other fine-tune adjustments. But I think that looks pretty great. Now we're going to talk about some advanced techniques, and this is where often you might have to jump outside of Mylio. Mylio is great at helping you adjust the pixels that are already there. But if the pixels need to be repaired, that's when you're going to have to jump to another option. For me, that's usually going to be Photoshop. You can use Photoshop Elements, which is a lot less expensive and kind of a one-off purchase. And there's a lot of other tools out there that have healing brushes and erase tools and things like that, that you can put these same techniques to use. But for this example, I'm going to go ahead and use Photoshop. And then we also have restoration. Restoration is going to be anything from cleaning up the grain, sharpening, bringing out detail, enhancing faces, and then even colorization if that's something that you're interested in doing. So some of my favorite tools, there's GFP-GAN, which is a web utility. You go just do a web search for GFP-GAN, go to their website, and you upload a photo. You tell it to run its thing. It does facial recognition, and then enhances faces. I think it does some level of upscaling, and it's completely free to use. So it's a really fun thing. Then we have Topaz Photo AI, which is actually one of my favorite tools. This does noise reduction or helps with the grain, sharpening. It'll help enhance faces, and it does a tremendous job of upscaling images. There's also tools like PhotoMine, which if you have that on your phone, you might use it for scanning images, but there's also some great tools inside that app and in their web interface for doing photo restoration, colorization, and things like that. So these are some of my favorites, but there's a lot of other options out there. So let's go ahead and take this image here on the right and walk through what a restoration like this looks like. I'm going to go ahead and just switch back over here to Mylio so you guys can see the extent of the damage in this image. Now, this photo is something I found in a collection that my mom had, and we don't know who these people are, but it looks very pagan, and it's a very, very interesting photo. And restoring this has been a lot of fun, but you can see there's, missing edges, there's a lot of creases, just a lot of physical damage to this photo. So what I'm going to start with here is converting this to a true black and white. So under the color section, I'm going to go ahead and click black and white. And then I'm going to go up to the auto tone. And that's immediately going to improve this image quite a bit. Now I feel like it made the blacks a little bit too dark. So I can grab the black slider and move that up to the right a little bit. That looks pretty good. And maybe add a little bit of clarity. We're already getting better results here than what we started with. What I'd also like to do is crop this. And it's a little bit crooked here, so I'm going to go ahead and use the slider at the bottom to straighten this out. And then pull in from the bottom, get rid of some of this. Since the bottom here of the picture is really not holding anything of interest, I don't mind losing some of the gravel here. And again, over here at the right, I'm going to pull this over just to get rid of that tear. I want to leave the photographer's mark here because I feel like that's an important part of the image. And over here on the right, again, I'm going to pull this in pretty significantly, maybe right about there. And again, that gets rid of some of the damage. It's just going to be less for us to correct in Photoshop. So let's go ahead and click done. And now what I'm going to do is go up here to photo and open this with Photoshop. Now I want to do a copy with Mylio adjustments in this case because I made some changes here in Mylio and I want those changes to travel with the photo. In this case, I'm going to choose a high quality TIFF. That's an archival level file. ProPhoto RGB is my color space, and the 16-bit depth. That's going to give me the best quality file to edit with. So I'm going to go ahead and click continue, and that's going to go and create a copy of the image and open that up in Photoshop for me. So there we go. From Photoshop, what I like to do before I get started, and because I like to preserve and be able to go back and see my steps, I'll duplicate my layer. So you can right click on the layer and choose duplicate. There it is, duplicate layer. Or if you're a big fan of keyboard shortcuts, you can simply use the keyboard shortcut command J, and that duplicates it. So now any changes I'm making are on a separate layer from my original. Now from here, I'm going to go ahead and zoom in on some of these areas that have some damage. And then I'm going to use this tool here. It looks like a little Band-Aid, and that's my remove tool. And that's going to help me clean up some of these different issues on this image. I can use the bracket keys on my keyboard to make that brush size smaller. And then I'm going to go ahead and just paint over some of these areas that have issues. As I do this, I want to get close to the edge of transition. So like where it's just barely touching the edge of our dress, and go ahead and do that. And that's going to go ahead and clean up that tear. Again, we can do the same thing here with the scratch that's across the front of her. And we can go through and clean up all of these different little artifacts in this image. And you can get as detailed as you like. But again, it's a matter of preserving some of that natural beauty and historical quality of this image. So over here on the right, we have a place here that has some very significant damage. And when you're using something like this tool in Photoshop, it's going to give you kind of hit and miss results. Sometimes it's awesome. Sometimes it does weird things to faces. So let's take a look here and see what we can do. And as you do this, I do recommend working in smaller pieces. Don't try to brush out a huge piece. Do a little bit at a time. So let's go ahead and take this area here. Let's go ahead and get rid of that blemish. And then we're just going to start coming in here and getting rid of some of these different pieces. And the thing with this is it's not going to be perfect, but it's going to be better than it was. And again, here, this one tear we have right across her face. Again, I'm going to do this kind of in pieces and see how much we can kind of preserve of what's going on here with her face. And that looks pretty amazing. So again, like I said, you can go through and you can be very detail oriented in correcting a lot of these different blemishes here. Like we can get rid of some of these different tears and scratches and clean this up. There's a big one here across here. Let's just go ahead and get it right here along the edge. And like I said, you can spend a ton of time with this. I'm going kind of fast because I know we don't have a ton of time today. But there we go. You get the idea of what you can do with this. We'll zoom back out and take a look here at what we've done. So there's before and the after. Turn that back on. All right, from this, what I'd like to do is take this into Topaz Photo AI. And what that's going to do is some facial recognition. It's going to bring out some of the detail in their faces, and it's going to bring out some of the detail overall. If this image was a really, really small photo, it could also upscale it, and it just does some really cool enhancements. So from Photoshop, you can open Topaz Photo AI separately. You don't have to go through Photoshop, but that's the way I'm doing it right now. So I'm going to go up to Filter and go down to Topaz Labs and open Topaz Photo AI. And this launches it from within Photoshop. But like I said, you don't have to have Photoshop to do this. So when you first open it up, it's going to analyze the image and go through a set of what it thinks the image needs. So it's detecting the subject, it's finding faces, and making some corrections that it thinks this image needs. So it's still running, and it does take a little while. One thing to know about programs that are heavily reliant on AI is it helps to have a fast computer. And even if you have a fast computer, it can sometimes take a little while to work. So let's go ahead and take a look here and maybe zoom in here a little bit closer. I'm gonna go ahead and bring this up to like 200% because on Zoom, sometimes it's a little harder to see. But we're gonna be able to see that these faces are a little bit more clear. It's taken away some of the grain, some of the other artifacts on her face. We have a little bit more detail in the dress and so forth. So we can take a look at all of these different faces. And I think it's just marvelous how much detail it's able to bring out. So we can go ahead and take a look at all these people. Now, one thing that I would say to watch out for is this girl right here is particularly blurry. I think when this photo was taken, she probably moved a little bit. Now, this did a really good job of bringing back her face. But if you look at her clothing, it looks a bit, I don't know how to describe it other than jittery. Like there's just, you can see kind of the edges here. So that's something you want to watch for. And you can use Photoshop to mask that out and do things like that. Completely up to you, but you'll see how much detail this brought back. So I'm going to go ahead and say save to Photoshop. And then from there, I can save that as a TIFF, and that'll end up back in my Mylio library. So this is wonderful. And it looks so much better than it did before. So there's the before and there's our after. So this is a great way to go through and edit a few things. Any questions here?
There are a couple questions. Elizabeth was asking, will Elements do that or Radiant?
So Elements, you should be able to do most of this with Elements. Radiant, no. So Radiant has some great tools, again, for working with the pixels that are there, but it doesn't have a erase tool. So it's not going to help you do like getting rid of tears and physical damage, but it can help with some of the noise. It can do quite a lot of things. It does have the facial recognition, so it might be able to pull up some additional details and faces. Different tools have different tool sets. All right, what else we got?
Let's see. Does this process only work with black and white? Buddy's asking.
No, not at all. You can do this with color as well. Absolutely.
Okay, all right.
And then here I see using on one, pretty much all of this can be done in on one as well.
Yep, and I'll take care of Steve. Okay.
Excellent. Let's see what else we've got here. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and jump back here to the presentation for a minute. And we can take a look at another image that has some physical damage. So this gets us a little closer to what do we want to preserve? What do we want to do with our images? So you can see this one has a lot of grain in it. Well, that's because this is actually a newspaper clipping. This picture is of my aunt. She's the same one who was the one on the phone in an earlier image. And she had a very short stint in her teenage years where she did some modeling. And this was an advertisement for a tractor company. And she just looks absolutely adorable. But you can see, like, let me actually go to the picture here in my library, that the image is a little bit damaged, that somebody took this newspaper clipping and folded it up a couple of times, and it's just not in the best of shape. But we can actually fix this really, really easy using those same processes that I just showed you. So again, I'm going to go ahead and just undo this, make sure it's back to its original. I can do that auto tone. That gives a little bit more contrast. I feel that's a little dark, so we can hit that auto enhance and maybe pull up those blacks a little bit more. And then again, we can open this up in Photoshop. So I'm going to go ahead and say open with, choose Photoshop. And again, I'm going to do that edit a copy with Mylio adjustments. Choose continue. And here we go. So again, we can go ahead and duplicate that layer. So we're now working on a copy of the layer. Grab your erase tool, whatever erase tool you're using. And I do recommend zooming in, but we're just going to go fast here. I'm going to go ahead and just get rid of some of these creases. Clean that up a little bit. And again, like I said, working in small chunks in between different textures in an image can really give you much better results. So already that looks phenomenal. Now let's go ahead and again, let's open this up in Topaz. So let's go ahead and Topaz Photo AI. And what I like about what this does is we have some options of how we apply this. In this case, I don't necessarily want to get rid of that grain. This is a newspaper article, and that's part of the history of this piece. However, I do want to bring out a little bit more detail in her face. And so we covered the faces, it's thinking. We'll go ahead and let it give a moment to update here. And it looks like my computer might be giving me issues right now. Sometimes when I'm running all of these things get slow. But what you're going to end up with, if I jump back over here to Keynote, is you can see it smoothed out the grain a little bit, but it didn't get rid of it. And it also brought out some really lovely details in her face without changing the character of the image. I think that's a really great thing. And it's made this image that much better for me. So the last thing I kind of wanted to talk about was preserving the originality and balancing what we can do with restoration and all the really cool tools to keep it real, not take it too far. So this is one more image here in my library. Let me go ahead and just jump back over here to Mylio. And let's see here. I know it's here. There we go. If I go ahead and reset this back to the original, you can see this was scanned in on like a legal size scanner. I've cropped it in, and let's go ahead and just do that right now really quick. Go ahead and bring up that to right about there. But you can see that this was a picture that was originally in a picture frame. We've got some pretty significant discoloration. It's quite yellowed. I don't think this was originally a sepia tone image. I think it was a black and white. So in this case, I'm going to just go down here and convert this to a black and white and use my auto tone and then maybe pull the blacks up a little bit. And that looks pretty great. That's going to be, to me, probably the most authentic restoration I can do to this image. Now, there's a lot of tools out there that allow you to colorize things, and those are a lot of fun. So I did do that here. Photoshop has it. You can do it in PhotoMine. A lot of great apps out there to colorize old images automatically. You no longer have to go in there and hand paint them, which is really cool. So I did that here. You can see it's not perfect, like it missed a spot on my grandma's forehead. And my dress here has kind of two colors, which is weird. But for the most part, it gives you a sense of place. It gives you a little bit more sense of what was going on. And it's just a completely different feel of the photo. For me, I like having that, but I also want to preserve this version here. As I'm going through and doing restorations, I will always, always, always keep my original scan. I personally think that hard drive space is inexpensive, and you want to make sure you have those originals, because sometimes you might go back to something you processed and go, ooh, I missed that. I didn't do a very good job. And if you baked in those changes, you can't go back and fix it. So keeping that original scan is very, very important. Then anything else you do, you're going to want to keep that as an additional copy. And there's no problem. There's nothing wrong with going through and doing things like colorizing, but the one that's going to preserve the history the best is going to be the one that's probably the most natural. Certainly go through and fix physical damage. Do a little bit to bring out those faces, make sure people are recognizable, but do your best to preserve restoration and originality. It's a fine line, and everybody's line is going to be a little bit different, but I think that it's something that you need to consider as you're going through this process. So that pretty much sums up what I wanted to cover with you guys today. I hope that you enjoyed this. I hope it gives you some ideas of what you can do with your library. The editing is a lot of fun between what we can do inside of Mylio photos and then some of the external tools we can work with. There's just so many options, and I look forward to seeing what you guys are doing. If you are going through and preserving some of your own photos and you'd like to share, what I would recommend is going up here to the help menu and go into the community. And there is a family history section in here. Also, there's a share a photo section. Either one will work, but let's say family history. For this, if you go down here to the groups under family history, I would love to see you guys share some of the pictures that you've worked on and restored, whether with just Mylio photos or other tools, and share your process, because everybody has a little bit different way of doing things. And this would be a really fun way to see what you guys are up to. So let's go ahead and take a look here at the chat and see what we've got going on here.
Yep, we have a couple questions. One of them is, what about Adobe Lightroom?
So sure, yeah, you can use Lightroom. So a lot of times I use Adobe Camera Raw and Photoshop for my editing. And that's because when you're using Lightroom and you're using Mylio, you have potentials for conflicts because you're using two different image management tools. You can use them in conjunction with each other, and we have instructions for doing that in our manual, but it can get a little bit dicey. But Lightroom has some great masking tools. It has some healing tools. A lot of what I talked about today, you can do in Lightroom.
Karen has a
Karen said,
question.
yeah, getting the process, getting images back into Mylio. Absolutely. So let me go back over here to Photoshop. Let me actually close. Yeah, let's close out the topaz here. Good, save that back to Photoshop. Give that just a second. There we go. So from here, because we created a TIFF with Mylio, we exported a copy and exported a TIFF. All I need to do here is just do save. Go ahead and hit save. So Command or Control S, or up to the file menu, hit OK. And I'm gonna go ahead and close that out. Jump back over to your Mylio. Right now I am in an album, so it's not going to show in an album because that's going to go back to the original folder. But I go to the image in the album and I click on show in folder. There's the original, and it might pop it at the top here. Let's see what we got here. It should pop it right into the same folder. There we go. Right there at the top. And there's our edited version. Photoshop will put it back into that same folder, and then you can add it to whatever albums or whatever you need in your library. Very, very simple. If you're using another editor that doesn't automatically put it back in the same folder, what I would recommend in that case is you can just do a file, do a save or a save as, or an export. You can do an export as well, and then pop it into your Mylio inbox. That'll get it into Mylio, and then you can move it as needed. All right, what else have we got?
Angela, there was a question about on one. You might
Mhm.
want to mention that it doesn't return quite the same as we might like it to.
So with on one, I believe you're going to want to do an export and export it back to that folder. Is that the best one, the best way you would say, Mark?
Yes, sorry, I was muted. Yeah, that's what
That's
we
all right, no
discovered
worries.
a couple sessions ago. We talked about that and tried it, and we discovered the problem.
Yeah. So yeah, you'd want to do your edits in on one and then just export it back to the same folder where the original lives, or put it into the inbox. That gets it back into your library.
And if you want to have a display copy, you need to rename it manually. There is no way
Yes.
in on one.
Yeah, that's true. All right. So Lori asked, will I speak to the process of tagging and culling images within Mylio? Lori, that's kind of a big topic, but we can go over that briefly. Um, let's see here. Let me find a folder that needs some of that.
Mainly just looking to mark them for deletion. You know, when you're going through, like you bring them in from your camera and you just want to go through and call them real quickly.
Yeah,
I know
absolutely.
that kind of thing is what I'm looking for.
Yeah. And so have you been a Lightroom user in the past?
Yes, and I used to it used to be R, I think, for reject, but I
So
couldn't
actually it's
figure out
X.
any. Oh, okay. I
It's,
couldn't figure out the
yep.
shortcut.
Yeah.
Is it
So if
the
we go
same in
into it,
Mylio?
pardon?
Same in Mylio?
In Mylio and in Lightroom. So the keyboard shortcuts, we made them the same. So if you're going through your images and you go, okay, this one I like, this one I don't, you can hit the X on the keyboard that marks it as a reject. Go to the next one. Oh, I really like this one. Click the P on the keyboard that marks it as a pick. Then later on, what you can do is you can go up to the organize menu and choose delete rejected photos, and that'll permanently delete all of those rejects from whatever grouping you're looking at. If you're in all photos, it'll delete them from all photos. If you're in a specific folder, it'll only delete them from that folder.
Okay, perfect. That's what I need. Thank you.
You're welcome. And then if you accidentally tag something with a flag that you don't want, hit the period key and that toggles it and you can toggle it off. All right, let's see what else we got. So Karen says, in this case, would you keep the keeping it real version is what shows in Mylio, but also duplicate and have a colorized version showing in Mylio? Yes, exactly. So I would do my basic, in that one images instance, I will edit it in Mylio. And the beauty of editing in Mylio, let me just show you here real quick. Go back to that album. So this particular image, I can always go here into edit. This is my original. I can either compare the before and after, or I can reset and go back to my original. So this is non-destructive editing, meaning it's not changing anything about the original image, but it's just showing me those changes when I look at it in Mylio. And then next to it, I have the colorized version. So I have two versions of this image, and then I can always switch back to my original if I need to. Let's see, Buddy is asking if there are resources for people that do restoration as a service. There are a lot of services out there that do them. We can see what we can find as far as some recommendations. I don't have any off the top of my head, but I know there's a lot of really good ones out there. So Peter says, what do you do about the duplicates when you save the original and also the edited? Won't they always show up when you dedupe? No, because if you take an image and you duplicate it and then you edit the copy, it's no longer going to be showing as a duplicate. So that's not going to be an issue. Is Topaz AI free? No, it is not free. The one that's free is GFP GAN, and that is a web utility you can use. Really cool tool, but Topaz AI is not inexpensive, but it is a very cool piece of software. And I feel like it's very much worth the money if these things are something that you want to try to do. Yeah, GFP GAN. Lori, you typed it in. It's GAN, GFP GAN. And yes, Topaz does have I believe, a 30-day free trial. Red eye correction, sure. I'll touch on red eye correction. So here in Mylio, if I go ahead and zoom in on this image here, actually, let's see if I can get in a little closer. I don't really think we have red eye on this image, but if we did, what you can do is click this little red eye tool here. And then you can use your bracket keys on your keyboard. to make that bigger or smaller. And you go in and you just mark that on the eye and mark that on the other eye. And then you can adjust the sensitivity and the radius here at the bottom. And then once you're ready, click done, and it will have corrected that red eye. So it's very, very simple. You can do as many different eyes. If you have a bunch of people in an image, you can go ahead and correct all of their eyes. All right. Any other questions?
Oop, there's one from Terry.
Oh, Dennis, one from Terry?
Yeah, very
Oh,
last
there we
one.
go. Am I getting this right? You don't do the editing in Mylio, but use third-party software you have to pay for. So Terry, I'd say about 70% of what I showed today was here in Mylio Photos. This is the edit tab here. And a lot of what we did was using auto tone, auto color, auto enhance. We use the invert tool, levels. You can do a lot of this here in Mylio. However, if you have extensive damage, you will need to go to a third-party application that actually lets you move pixels around. So when you need to do things like repairing scratches or tears, Mylio can't do that. So there are many different applications out there. Some are free, some are paid, some are better than others. If you're on mobile, Snapseed is another good option that has some healing tools in there. Again, the ones you pay for, typically going to give you better results, but certainly work within your budget, work with what's available to you. And there's lots of options out there. Will Mylio provide extensive damage repair in the future? Unlikely. So Mylio is designed to help you organize your photos. The tools that are in Mylio are basic for a reason, because we're not out to be a jack of all trades. We want to do the things that we do, we want to do them really, really well. And the more things we try to add into a program, it gets bloated, the code gets messy. And it's kind of, it's not really a great thing to have one software that does everything, to be perfectly honest. I've worked for software companies that do that, and it usually ends up being something they have to kind of pull back from, because when you try to do all the things, you're not doing anything very well. So I don't foresee us being a pixel editor in the future. I'm not going to say it's never going to happen, but I wouldn't count on that. Let's see here. So Elizabeth's asking, do edits auto-save? In Mylio, yes. If you go through here and let's say we want to adjust the clarity a little bit, maybe pull down a little bit on the saturation, all of these are saved in the XMP file that goes with your picture. So you don't have to do anything. You don't have to click save here in Mylio. And then if you ever want to revert, you just click the reset button up here, reset the edits, and you're back to your original. If you ever want to reset a specific slider, you're like, ooh, I don't like that change, you can actually just double click on it and it puts it back to the default. So that's really nice and easy. All right. Any other questions? Well, I want to thank you guys all for joining me today. This has been, like I said, one of my favorite topics to cover. I love doing editing, and doing this family history stuff is a lot of fun. So hopefully it gave you some ideas of what to do with your own libraries. And like I said, I really hope you guys go into the community and share some of the things that you're working on and any new techniques you come across that make this work for you. So with that, I want to wish you guys a wonderful weekend. Hope you get out and take some pictures, have fun, and we will see you next time.